Well, now that the 2-year Russian collusion hoax, which is exactly what it was, has now been exposed, I'm pleased to report that CNN and MSNBC are hemorrhaging a massive number of viewers since then. Now, compared to the same week last year, CNN has lost 47% of its primetime audience and 41% of its total day viewers. Here. Good stuff. Now, during primetime, the left-wing outlet also lost 28% of its viewers, and throughout the total day, MSNBC was down 20%. Fox lost only 8% of its primetime viewers and 12% of its total day viewers. But it gets worse. In the advertiser-coveted age bracket, which is 25 through 54, CNN has lost 52% of its total day viewers and an even more incredible 58% of its primetime viewers. In 1 year, over half of its viewers has gone in 1 year. You know, if that continues, they'll have less listeners than this show, which will be a good thing, I think. MSNBC lost 43% in that age bracket, total day, and 48% of its primetime viewers. By comparison, Fox also lost 27% in total day and 29% in prime time. The overall numbers for last week, Fox was number one in all of the cable with 2.438 million primetime viewers. MSNBC was a distant second with 1.6, and CNN came in 15th place with 690,000 average primetime viewers. By Clinton News Network. The Food Network attracted more primetime viewers than CNN, and during the total day, Fox News was number one with 1.3 million viewers, MSNBC with 899, and CNN stumbled into 9th place with 510 average viewers, 10,000. Oh my, it's plummeting. A sign of change. A subtle one, but it's still a sign of change. A 29-year-old woman has been shot dead in Londonderry in Northern Ireland, and what police are treating as a terrorist incident. We'll have more on that later. Dissident Republicans are being blamed for the killing, which is the IRA, which happened during rioting after police searches in Derry's Cregan area on Thursday night last week. Petrol bombs were thrown at police Land Rovers, and the Assistant Chief Constable Mark Hamilton said the police were treating the shooting as a terrorist incident and a murder inquiry had been launched. There are reports that the trouble broke out after police raids on houses in Mulroy Park and Gallia areas. Question for listeners: anyone think this is linked to Brexit? No? Look closer. Senator Mitt Romney, who we'll hear about later, said Friday he was sickened. You'll be sickened when you read our report later, Mr. Romney. By what he read in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report on Russian interference in the 2016 election and Donald Trump's attempts to cover it up. Now, Romney became one of the first Republican members of Congress and the most prominent to date to criticise the Trump administration and the president for behaviour detailed by Mueller. It is good news that there was insufficient evidence to charge the President of the United States with having conspired with a foreign adversary. This is Romney. Or with having obstructed justice. The alternative would have have taken us through a wrenching process with the potential for constitutional crisis, and so the business of government can move on. Even so, he said, I'm sickened at the extent and pervasiveness of dishonesty and misdirection by individuals in the highest office of the land, including the president. He also went on and said, I'm also appalled that, among other things, fellow citizens working in a campaign for president welcomed help from Russia, including information that has been illegally obtained, that none of them acted to inform American law enforcement, and that the campaign chairman was actively promoting Russian interests in the Ukraine. Like I said, we'll have more on that later. Another former president who's been exposed for corruption and fraud. A large hoard of cash has been found at the home of Sudan's ousted president Omar al-Bashir, and he's now being investigated for money laundering. Security services found euros, dollars and Sudanese pounds totaling more than $130 million. When you think how the people in that country are suffering and struggling, and he's sitting there with $130 million. Now, the ex-leader was not placed in jail. He was placed under house arrest. It's funny how they can pull that one off. After months of protests led to his removal by the Sudanese people, and reports say Mr. Bashir is now being held at the Kobar high security prison. He was then moved on, and a source in Sudan's judiciary told CIA news agency Reuters that suitcases loaded with more than $351,000 hang on, that's not right. A load of $6.7 million, another $6 million in euros, and $5.2 million in pounds, and 5 billion Sudanese pounds, 105 million US dollars, were found at Mr. Bashir's home. And the source also confirmed he was under investigation, and prosecutors said they would question the former president in Kobar prison. And the mass sit-in in Sudan continues in the centre of Khartoum amid a lack of trust that the military council who has taken over is committed to handing over power to a civilian transitional authority. So the people want to control the government. Sounds good to me. Each day concessions are announced, but there's little proof that what's been promised has been delivered, and there has been no images of the former president in prison, nor any response from the generals over a demand they give up power to a civilian administration. Now, the general's public prosecutor's announcement that Mr. Bashir is being investigated for money laundering is news the demonstrators liked to hear. Another one with money has been charged this week. US heiress Claire Bronfman has pleaded guilty in her role in an alleged, at this point, not exactly agreeing that she committed sex trafficking, but an alleged sex trafficking operation. Now, Bronfman, the 40-year-old heir to the Seagram alcohol fortune, was accused of using more than $100 million to fund the suspected sex cult NXIVM. Unbelievable. And she pled guilty on 2 counts: conspiracy to conceal and harbour illegal immigrants for financial gain, and fraudulent use of identification. That's the only thing she's pled guilty to. Nothing to do with the sex trafficking and all the other nonsense that goes on. She told the court in Brooklyn that she was truly remorseful. I wanted to do good in the world and help people. Really? These people, they make you laugh. Well, actually, it's not funny. 100 million to brand women. However, she went on, I have made mistakes. 6 people in total have been accused of being involved with NXIVM, and Bronfman is the 5th to plead guilty, with just one defendant left, the cult leader Keith Raniere, due to go on trial next month. Now, Bronfman will be sentenced on July the 25th, and she could face up to 25 years in prison, although sentencing guidelines suggest it could be only 27 months. These people with money get away with murder. 25 years to 27 months. Horrifying story, and I will cover this type of story more in an op-ed piece. But Nusrat Jahan Rafi was doused with kerosene and set on fire at her school in Bangladesh this week, less than 2 weeks after she had filed a sexual harassment complaint against her headmaster. Her courage in speaking out against sexual assault and her death 5 days after being set alight, and everything that happened in between, has kind of gripped Bangladesh and brought attention to the vulnerability of sexual harassment victims in this South Asian country. Now, Nusrat, who was 19, was from Feni, a small town 100 miles south of Dhaka, and she was studying at a madrasa, which is an Islamic school. And on March the 27th, she said the headmaster called her into his office and repeatedly touched her in an inappropriate manner. Now, before things could go any further, she ran out. Now, the backdrop to this is many girls and young women in Bangladesh choose to keep their experiences of sexual harassment or abuse secret for fear of being shamed by society or their families. Now, what made Ms. Rafi different is that she didn't just speak out, she went to the police with the help of her family on the day the alleged abuse happened, and the local police station she gave a statement to should have been provided her with a safe environment to recall her what is a rather traumatic experience. Instead, what took place, she was filmed by the police officer in charge on his phone as she described the ordeal, and in the video she was visibly distressed and tries to hide her face with her hands, and the policeman is heard calling the complaint, quote, no big deal, and telling her to move her hands from her face. The video was later leaked onto local media. Sadly, that girl died 5 days later. Unbelievable. Russia has banned exports of oil and petroleum products, among other goods, to Ukraine. There's a lot more to Ukraine than meets the eye. It will become more prevalent in the coming weeks and months, as well as blacklisting certain imports from the country in response to Kiev's sanctions against Moscow. Now, apart from oil, the expanded restrictions on specific Ukrainian goods include engineering products, consumer goods, and metal products worth almost $250 million. This is according to the Russian Prime Minister, Mr. Medvedev. Now, the embargo, which comes into effect immediately, includes bulldozers, pipes and pipeline vehicles and other items. Now, the document also says that the shipments of coal, gasoline and diesel fuel, which is significant, will be restricted starting from June the 1st. And supplying these will only be possible under special government orders. Now, the new sanctions also forbid some exports from Ukraine, including clothing, shoes, socks, amongst other goods, and the measure comes in retaliation to Kiev's new sanctions, which was announced on April the 10th. Now, it's not the first time the two sides have expanded economic restrictions against each other, with Russia usually retaliating to NATO moves. NATO runs Ukraine, and so does Israel. Now, the latest tit-for-tat response came last December when Russia slapped Ukraine with a ban on the imports of more than 50 Ukrainian goods worth $510 million, and it came shortly after Kiev extended its own embargo on Russian foods until the end of 2019. Now, despite bilateral trade restrictions, the turnover between Russia and Ukraine has been increasing in recent years, with Russia enjoying a significant trade surplus. This next one annoys me no end. But I'll try and be diplomatic, perhaps not. US authorities have arrested a member of the militia, American militia, that has been stopping migrants trying to cross the US-Mexico border. Larry Mitchell Hopkins was detained in New Mexico as a felon in possession of a weapon, and it comes just days after a video emerged of militia members detaining dozens of migrants in the desert. Now, the group United Constitutional Patriots has been condemned by civil rights groups and also local officials. This is a dangerous felon who should not have weapons around children and families, said New Mexico Attorney General Hector Balderas. Today's arrest by the FBI indicates clearly that the rule of law should be in the hands of trained law enforcement officials, not armed vigilantes. Really? Well, clearly, from my opinion, the FBI and others haven't done their job of protecting this country, Mr. Balderas. You and your ilk have done little to nothing to correct the flow of drugs, child trafficking, organ harvesting programs, or MS-13 gangs in your own state. But then, is it not the case, or likely, that you're in the pockets of the Bush-owned Texas Rangers, who run things down there? Let's let everything and all and sundry carry on. Ain't that right, Mr. Balderas? I think it's time you shut your pie hole and do the job you're paid to do. These people are risking their lives to protect their country, something the officials, the FBI, the CIA and the military and the Pentagon have failed to do. Kudos to the militia who did take part in that, United Constitutional Patriots. The US has launched a multi-million-dollar cleanup operation at an airbase in Vietnam this week. It used to store the notorious chemical Agent Orange, and the 10-year program, unveiled more than 4 decades after the end of the Vietnam War, will cost $183 million at the site Bien Hoa Airport outside Ho Chi Minh City, and it is considered the most contaminated in the country. Now, Agent Orange was a defoliant sprayed by US forces to destroy jungles and uncover the enemy's hiding places. It contains dioxin, which is one of the most toxic chemicals known to man and has been linked to increased rates of cancers and birth defects. Vietnam says several million people have been affected by Agent Orange, including 150,000 children born with severe birth defects. At Bien Hoa, the chemical has contaminated the soil and also seeped into nearby rivers. They also poisoned their own troops. Mr. Bailey will be able to tell you a lot more on that. At least 207, now 260 people have been killed and 450 plus hurt in explosions at churches and hotels in Sri Lanka this week. 8 blasts were reported, including 3 churches in Negombo, Batikakola and Colombo's Kosh Chikade district during the Easter services. The Shangri-La, Kingsbury and Cinnamon Grand luxury hotels, all in the capital, were also targeted, and a curfew in Colombo was put in place until further notice. While investigations covered things up, no doubt, and social media networks have been temporarily blocked. All smacks of New Zealand, doesn't it? I'll have more on Sri Lanka later. And it remains unclear who carried out the attacks. A foreign ministry official said at least 27 foreign nationals are among the dead, and Sunday's attacks were the deadliest seen in Sri Lanka since the end of the country's civil war back in 2009. Now, the civil war ended with the defeat of the Tamil Tigers, who had fought for 26 years for an independent homeland for the minority ethnic Tamils. The war is thought to have killed between 70 and 80,000 people, and the nation has seen some sporadic violence since. In March 2018, a state of emergency was declared after members of the majority Buddhist Sinhala community attacked mosques and Muslim-owned properties. I'm not too sure they did. We'll find out why later in some op-ed pieces on that. Where are we next? An Egyptian court this week, the differences between the West and the Middle East, jailed a pop singer for 2 years for suggestively eating a banana and appearing in her underwear in a recent music video. Shyama's video for the song I Have Issues caused immediate outrage in Egypt, and since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi came to power in 2014, authorities have used wide-ranging morality laws to clamp down on freedom of expression. And she said, I didn't imagine all this would happen, and I would be subjected to such a strong attack from everyone as a young singer who has dreamt from a young age of being a singer. And the Egyptian Musicians Union subsequently banned Shyama from performing, and the content of the video clip is declared harmful to the Egyptian society. And she got 2 years jail for that. I'll cover that more later as well. US President Donald Trump has decided to end exemptions from sanctions for countries that are still buying oil from Iran. The White House said waivers for China, India, Japan, South Korea and Turkey would expire in May, after which they could face US sanctions themselves. And this decision is intended to bring Iran's oil exports to zero, whilst the neo-hawks loot Venezuela for free and also Iraq for free. Not good. Denying the government its main source of revenue, Mr. Trump reinstated the sanctions last year after abandoning a nuclear deal between Iran and 6 world powers. That's because Iran already has nuclear power and nuclear weapons given to them by Israel. Oops. Now, under a the 2015 accord, Iran agreed to limit its sensitive nuclear activities and allowing international inspectors in return for sanctions relief. Clear it's nothing to do with nuclear weapons or allowing inspectors in. Remember, they allowed the inspectors in Iraq to search for weapons of mass destruction, which Britain and American companies sold them, I might add, only to find there was none there. And it was reported back there was none there. And yet they still went to war.